Hi Molly, thanks for coming in today. It's nice to finally meet you. I've heard some amazing things. My name's Cody and I'll be conducting your interview today. Our interview consists of 12 standardized questions. Are you ready to begin?
Hi, it's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Tell me about a time in clinicals at FTCC in which you delivered high quality, patient centered care to individuals, families, groups, and communities in varied settings.
One time in clinical, and it was actually one of my first clinical rotations, we had a patient who one of my classmates actually knew. And so in that moment, it was kind of also taking care of my classmate and taking care of the patient. And one of the things that we had to quickly do is kind of reevaluate my classmate and get her back on a page where she was able to give proper care. So I was able to help with that situation. But our main goal in that particular thing was to actually give this patient a bath, which it had looked like she hadn't for weeks. And so once we were able to kind of take care of my classmate, then we were able to move towards our patient. And her and I together worked really well to get this patient a bath, including like washing her hair and brushing it out. And I think I even gave her a braid. And so that's what we did.
Tell me how you used something you learned from one of your class assignments to incorporate best practice and professional values and standards into compassionate nursing practice.
Early on, one of the research assignments that we had to do, and I actually think I learned this from a classmate, one of her assignments that she had to post, talking about NG tubes and how to place them and things like that. And she actually had a video that showed an NG tube going for a patient getting an NG tube, and how someone was asking the question of like, what can a nurse do in order to make that an easier process for them? Because obviously you're going to be uncomfortable with shoving a tube in your nose and down your throat. And the client basically said, by just taking it nice and easy and not being forceful, but also being able to still be fast so that that uncomfortableness doesn't last as long. And so I was able to kind of take that into my clinical experience while I was at Cape Fear, and I ended up placing an NG tube, and just remembering that information that was said during that project, and that teaching moment, and being able to incorporate that into how I worked with that patient, making sure that they were comfortable. And so I was able to place that NG tube with the least amount of discomfort that I could cause that patient. And the patient was actually thankful, and they appreciated how I did that.
Tell me an example of how you've demonstrated cultural and global congruency in the healthcare environment with diverse populations and the promotion of healthy lifestyles and preventative health screenings at clinicals at FTCC.
One of the clinical experiences that I had was actually a rotation out to serve with displaced people in Fayetteville. We were able to see where they lived. We were able to see and ask them questions. Our main goal there was to be able to feed them lunch, and then be able to hand out pamphlets and different things to show them where they can get care, where they can get screenings. And then we were also able to answer a bunch of different health questions that they had, and being able to be that kind of face-to-face people that they needed in order to get that information so that they can get those preventative measures. The outcome of that is we actually did have several people who took that information, and they were really excited about being able to go to these different clinics, these different areas for screenings. And there were even some people who we had pamphlets for jobs, and they were able to take that and be able to go find jobs. So it was really cool to be a part of that.
Describe a situation in SIM or clinicals at FTCC where you function as an effective member of the healthcare team demonstrating excellent interprofessional collaboration.
One of our some experiences that we had in nursing school was a rapid code response. And I was part of the rapid response team, and our goal was to recognize that our patient was an MI, and what to do, and try to save our patient. We did not actually end up saving our patient, but we did end up working together. And so working with the head nurse and being able to communicate with her, working with the airway and compression nurse. I was med nurse, and then our note taker, I was able to communicate with him the different things that we had already done, the things that we were working on, and he was able to do time checks, and so we were able to quickly move down our steps. Even though we didn't make all the correct steps, we were still communicating to one another. One of the nurses actually stepped in and had to help me set the IV just because I was not able to do it fast enough and I needed the help. And I verbalized that to her, and without question, she stepped in and helped. So that's what our goal was. The outcome of that was, even though we were not able to save our patient, we still showed interprofessional working and communicating with one another in that situation.
Describe how you've demonstrated beginning skills in point-of-care leadership, management, and care coordination using effective communication skills through either successful completion of class projects or a clinical situation or experience.
In one of my clinical experiences, my clinical instructor would run it very much like how a regular unit would run. And so I ended up being charge nurse, and I had, I think, 4 floor nurses and a handful of CNAs, supportive personnel. And so we went into that situation, and I was able to delegate off to the nurses which patients that they had, give them a little bit of background and information, and then we moved into our actually giving care. I later found out that one of my nurses, one of her patients, she was actually an old friend of hers from school. And I ended up just taking a moment to ask them both questions and see if they both would be okay with her still providing her care. And both patient and nurse agreed that they would be fine with that. However, I later found that this was still becoming, even though they both were okay with it, we were still having issues getting timely care done and proper care for her other patients because she was so focused on this one patient. So I ended up switching her out for a different patient and giving that patient to a different nurse. That way we were able to have a more effective patient care for both that patient and all the other patients that we had on the unit that we had to take care of. The result was that the nurse that I had to remove from that patient, she wasn't super happy, but she did later end up respecting that decision. I felt terrible having to make that decision because I know she really wanted to take care of her friend, which I recognize and respect as well. But it was something we had to do to take care of all of the patients on the unit versus just the one. So we ended up being able to do that by making that decision.
Describe how you would implement safe and competent care to individuals through both system effectiveness and individual performance in varied healthcare settings.
One of my clinical experiences recently actually is that we had to place a urinary catheter for one of our patients. So we grabbed our kit and we started going in there and doing that. And one of the things that, and I almost didn't catch it, but for the cleaning the iodine, I looked at the patient before I'm very thankful that I caught it before I even opened the package. But I asked the patient if they were allergic to shellfish or iodine or anything like that, and they were able to verbalize to me that they were actually allergic to iodine. So I was able to just close up that kit and go get, because I had to leave the room, so I couldn't remain with the sterile kit. So I moved everything and I closed it all up, and I went and I got a new kit and got something other than the iodine to clean with, so that we were able to not cause any reactions to or for that patient, and make sure that we were able to give her safe care. And so then we were able to place the urinary catheter without causing any problems or reactions, and we were able to have that, and she was able to use it and be safe.
Describe a situation where you had a conflict with another individual and how you dealt with it. What was the outcome? How did you feel about it?
In one of my clinical experiences, I was working with one of my classmates on the unit, and we ended up having a disagreement on something and kind of built into an ongoing conflict of just kind of saying things that we didn't mean to one another and kind of being nasty. And when her and I tried to resolve it together, we realized we kind of needed somebody there with us. So we ended up contacting our clinical lead and talking with her and being able to work together and kind of have her mediate the conversation so that we were able to both verbalize our cares and concerns and work together and then finally have a better understanding of one another. And now we're actually really good friends and we're able to get along, and she's one of the people in the unit that I would trust more than anything.
Tell me about a time you received negative feedback in lab, class, or clinical, and tell me what you did about it.
One of my course lead instructors was giving feedback on, I believe it was a project of ours, and she just basically kind of told me like, oh, I expected you to do better. And she kind of gave the points on where she thought I should have done better on this project, in places where I fell short. And I just kind of took that information, and at first I was obviously hurt because I also knew that I could have done better. And that's always frustrating when you realize like, okay, I could have done better and I didn't. So I took that information and I was able to take the different criticisms that she had, and I was able to kind of compile them. And then when I was then faced with the same kind of project or even other different projects or even my clinical rotations, I was able to take that information and build upon that and do better and build kind of like a goal of working on those things that I missed in that. So I was able to not necessarily fix them entirely because there's always room for improvement, but I was able to start working on those things and make sure that I was doing better in those areas.
How do you prioritize projects and tasks when scheduling your time? And can you give me some examples?
So I prioritize my tasks and different things that I have to do with nursing school and even when I'm on the clinical unit. Most of the time, if they're time-sensitive items, like they have to get done first because they have a particular due date or they have a particular due time on the unit, I get those things done first. And then I start working through, okay, what is the most important thing that needs to get done? One of the things I did when I was a CNA was, because I worked on a unit that did a lot of dialysis, I worked on when dialysis was coming for each specific patient, when I would be able to do the bath for that patient and feeding, what time works better in that area and that time for that particular patient. And that was how I was able to go in there and be able to get my task done in a timely manner, to provide the best care for my patient, and to make sure I also wasn't in the way of the other caregivers like the dialysis nurses, nurses who were giving meds, and those things. So I was able to kind of keep that organized by working that way.
Describe a situation in which you recognized a safety concern. What was it? What did you do? And what was the outcome?
In one of my clinical rotations that I had, one of my patients was on multiple different sedatives because she had an endotracheal tube and a couple of other critical lines and things like that. And so she was on multiple sedatives, and I kept verbalizing that I was worried about her respirations, lungs and breathing and all of that, because we were already dealing with breathing problems, which is why she had the endotracheal tube. And then once they put on the third sedative, we started to see a drop in her O2s and an up in her respirations, which then obviously became a great concern, which I verbalized to the nurse that I was under, and we were able to remove some of those sedatives and stop the lines and then reevaluate and then come back and do better meds in order to keep her safe from that. So that's what we did.
Give me an example of methods you've used to build rapport with your patients and your peers.
The main ways that I like to use to build rapport with my clients and my peers is to kind of find out different things that they like. And if I also like those things, that's kind of a bonus point because then I'm able to actually have conversations about that. Like I had a patient who was really, really into football, and he was a Ravens fan and I'm a Steelers fan, which they are rivals. And initially I thought, okay, maybe that's not going to be the best way to approach this situation, talking about those things, because they are rivals. It can get kind of intense. But it was actually one of the ways that I was able to build a rapport with him, in which we, kind of teased each other and gentle ribbing here and there about the teams. And I was able to ask him, oh, did your Ravens win today? And how are they doing? I know one of his teammates was injured and stuff like that, and being able to talk to him about that. And it was a way that we were able to kind of form a relationship that way, and be able to get to know each other better. And that way I was able to provide better care for him as well.
Tell me a situation where honesty and integrity were used to promote patient advocacy and safety.
One time in one of my clinical experiences, actually for my CNA work, we were doing trach cleaning and suctioning. And when you do that, you put on, when it's not in one of those lines, you put on your sterile gloves. And I had put my sterile gloves on incorrectly, and I had actually broken sterility. And for a hot moment there, I just stood there because I knew I had messed up, and I didn't really exactly know what to do, because I'd never been in that actual situation. Because a lot of times when you're simulating and things like that, you just simulate changing your gloves, but I didn't have a change of gloves. And so I just I looked at my instructor and I was like, I have broken sterility. I messed up how I put on my gloves. And while that was frustrating, we had to stop and we had to undo everything and then go get another pack. To do that, it protected my patient, and kept them safe from anything that could have happened if there had been something on my gloves that could have gotten them sick. And so I was able to do that.
Molly, thank you for taking the time to speak with me today. I think you're going to do very great things in nursing, and I look forward to working with you in the future. Have a great day.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm looking forward to hearing back from you.